So welcome to our fourth installment of the LEANUP Start and Scale series, and we're talking about key metrics today and some other financial topics, but Jody will talk in a minute and she'll promise you it won't get too detailed on the finance side. My name is Jamie Bilsbach, and I'm the Center Director for Central Mountain Small Business Development Center, and we cover Chaffee, Lake, and Park counties. And Jody, I thought maybe you could dive in and do a quick introduction too.
Yeah, my name's Jody McPherson. I live in Castle Rock, Colorado, and I'm a co-founder and CEO of Upskills, which is a startup company matching college students to paid project entry work. And prior to that, I spent about 25 years in the ed tech industry at Pearson and McGraw-Hill developing software solutions, portfolios, and so forth for students. A lot of time in business development, sales, and product development as well. So excited to dive into this today with you guys.
And next slide. I apologize because we've talked about this each time, but I just want to quickly say to reach out to the Central Mountain SBDC. Please jump on our website, centralsbdc.org. You can click on what we do and connect with us via consulting, which is the quickest way to get a consulting session. Or you can see our workshops as well as the statewide workshops. And on our consulting sessions, we can connect you with local consultants, or we can connect you with experts throughout the state of Colorado. And finally, please consider joining the Central Mountain Entrepreneurs Group, which the logo on the homepage is how you can do that. And now I'm going to pass it off to Jody. Next slide.
All right. Hey, guys. So hi, Lisa. Hi. Wanted to get started. And today we're going to talk about cost structure and key metrics on the Lean Canvas. And as Jamie said, I'm going to do my best to non-financialize or
I'm having
accounting.
some connectivity problems, so I may not be able to stay with you.
Okay. We'll record this so you can watch it after too.
I hope there's a transcript available after.
There will be. And I'm not sure if you can hear me, but there will be. Okay. So we're going to talk about key metrics and cost structure. I'm going to try to drop some of the overdone accounting terms. When I was doing this the first time, I found these very intimidating years ago, and I still do sometimes. I think people throw terms around loosely and it can be very intimidating. So I'm going to try to, again, demystify these and kind of get to the basic things that you probably already know and give you the language to translate. Because remember, the canvas is a way to translate your vision for your business to somebody who doesn't know, so that people can help you and you can source resources and people. So if you think about it that way, it's not so much to be right all the time. This is sticky notes will come and go. It's about learning how to translate what you know to be, the keys to development for your success to others. So feel free to jump in. I think there will be more questions on this. And again, I'll try to demystify it. So let's get started. So when I think about cost structure and key metrics, building off the customer journey that you think of, I always take people back to that is, why are you doing what you're doing? Because that's really the heart of your business. It's really important to consider, what are your fixed costs? And I'm going to explain what each of these are and give examples. What are variable costs? Those that change over time based on production, monthly. Some budgeting exercises so that you can track revenue against cost. And keep in mind, this is a process. Getting the cost totally nailed down is a journey. It's not, you don't necessarily ever get there and it stays. It's just like your personal expenses. You kind of have a rough understanding for 85% of it, but there's always this 15% of things that vary. And so I think if you adopt that in business, it can be helpful. And doesn't mean you don't want to try to control costs or make good decisions. It just means it's not always perfect in terms of adding up. So it's important to get crisp on where the costs come from more than just the budgeting exercise. And then the last one is key metrics in addition to revenue and cost. So cost structure really just basically describes any cost associated with you operating your business. And that's anything from telephone to your what's often called a tech stack, which is really the equivalent of your computer, your website cost. It's what technology you use to do business. And the thing that I think is most interesting about cost is one is often we think we have all the costs. And I'll use the example, I should have put it in here, but you know how sometimes you sign up for apps and subscriptions and then you fail to turn them off is a great idea of hidden costs that we have. Sometimes we think we're spending, say, $1,000 a month on something and we're really spending like 1,200. Well, it's really important to understand all the costs and also understand where some of your hidden costs are. And I think that is very comparable to our personal lives. Anything that you do to operate your business is a cost. But here's the key thing that I would consider. When you make a decision to start a business, you have to kind of decide, and it may not happen overnight, am I going to be cost driven or am I going to be value driven? And I'll explain that in a second, the differences. Most of us, many of us are going to be in between. There are two extremes. Cost driven is more like Walmart. At all costs, I'm going to be the lowest option for anything you buy. Value driven would be more like the iPhone. I'm all about experience and you're going to pay for it. And most of us are going to fall somewhere in between, but it's a healthy debate and dialogue, and it's healthy to think about what is going to be more effective and efficient for your customers. It always goes back to who you're targeting and what are they going to value the most. So the three questions I kind of ask myself are, what are the most important costs inherent in my business model? What do I really need to make sure I understand? And what are my key resources that are going to be most expensive? Are those people? Is that a staffing resource, or is that an automation resource? Is that tech support for my website, or is it shipping? If I'm shipping, and I'm in a manufacturing kind of scenario, whatever is going to be the key resources, which ones are most expensive and why? And then what activities are most expensive? Again, back to having a face-to-face scenario where staffing really matters, or like in Dave's case, he's doing video production. Some of the activities are going to require a lot of staffing, and then you've got production and editing. I just went to a football event last night that had a high degree of filming. That's a lot of expenditures, taken into account in 1 4-hour sitting. So it's not just the resources, but it's also what activities are going to be most expensive. And that's just so that you can get an arm around it and make better decisions. It doesn't mean they go away. It just means that you can mitigate and modify around that to control your cost. Does that make sense, kind of conceptually? Okay. So cost-driven models are the leanest possible cost. You're doing things the lowest value propositions, the most efficient. I would say Southwest is a good example of that, or Frontier for airlines, where they do try not to nickel and dime you, but they try to get the cost down as low as possible. Walmart is another one. Going to Walmart or going to a specialty store is going to be different. And I think that in that case of low cost structure, you're looking at the most automation you can do, whether it's through the sales cycle, through follow-up, through emails that are automated, where you don't need a human touch, to generate a touch point on your customer. And a lot of times low cost or cost-driven models decentralize a lot of entry-level work, meaning they will outsource a lot. So for upskills, I don't need legal counsel all the time. So I outsource legal counsel. I use a generalist kind of model. Same is true with accounting. I use accounting a couple times a year, quarterly, when I'm submitting things, but I don't pay for an accountant to be on staff all the time. Does that make sense? Yeah. So cost structure strategy means that you use what it costs you as a tool to determine your pricing. If you're going to be the leanest, most efficient, you're going to pass that cost savings back on to your customer, and you're going to try to control those as much as you can so that you can keep the lowest cost and still have, make a profit based on what you do. Walmart to me is the best example of that. Like that, they're always talking about low prices. Now they're huge and extreme, but there's other places that you and I will go to on a regular basis that'll be more cost effective. And it really is about passing that cost savings on. So that is the number one reason that people come to you, is because you're a cost-driven entity. They know they're going to get the best price possible. Another good example, if you bought a car recently or thought about it, is AutoNation's No Hassle. They put their price out. They're saying that's the lowest I can give it to you for, whatever. So you're not negotiating when you go in there. So if to go buy a car, if they're pricing it at $9,000, that's what you're going to pay for it. And that's different in that it's not low cost, meaning Walmart low cost, but it's saying we're giving you the best possible price. So you're not going to have to deal with anything. It's going to be highly effective and convenient and a good savings of your time, which is in fact a cost savings for the customer. So cost structure as a strategy, that's one extreme. The other one is value-driven models. That's the other extreme of this. And this is all about value creation. Sometimes this will be a premium. Starbucks is a good example of that, paying $4 for a cup of coffee, to have the environment, the feel of going into a Starbucks, right? It's really an event, if you will. I'm meeting someone, I'm getting my coffee. It's, even now I'm sitting in Starbucks for better or for worse, right? It's the Christmas thing. This is what you're paying for, is the value and the premium. Luxury hotels are a good example. A cost-driven hotel might be a chain like a Hampton Inn, and a value-driven is more like a Ritz, and everything can fall in between there, but it gives you examples of I'm paying for price, cleanliness, stay. I love Hampton Inns, by the way. Convenience, right? They're easy. They have the breakfast for me. It's no frills. When I stay in a Ritz, I expect different things. Or if I stay I go on vacation in a resort, I expect to be pampered. So those are the two extremes, and largely we're going to fall in between those. And I think that's out of all the things, even identifying cost, understanding where you fall is really important, because it's going to make your priorities what they are, and it's going to adjust them and make things very clear. So how do you figure that out? You set your business up and you kind of have an idea of what it is. You don't necessarily know right away. Maybe you're like, I'm going to be the lowest cost X, but arguably I would go back to your user personas and say, well, what does Lauren want? Right? So if she's juggling a lot and she wants to entertain outside, this is her kind of profile. And her challenges are, I don't want to shop big box stores. I want to go local. I'd like to order online. If say I'm an Ace Hardware or I'm a local hardware store, and I want to have Lauren shop with me, I'm probably going to be in between cost driven. I can't be too overpriced compared to the big box stores, but I've got to make her feel like she's in Starbucks. Ace is the place, is kind of their model. They're a good example of I'm in between. You're going to pay a little more, and you're going to have someone greet you at the door, and you're going to have someone talk to you and walk you to the part in the aisle. And that's going to feel better. And everything you need is going to be here, just like it is in a big box store, but you're going to pay a little bit, and you're going to shop locally to a locally owned place. So before I think about, am I cost driven or value driven, go back to your personas and think about what do they want and what's going to generate them to take action and purchase whatever you're selling. For upskills, we started cost driven, and over a year and a half, we have evolved to value driven, almost really on that other side, which is an interesting thing. And that's going to happen a lot. And that is okay, as long as it's in line with who you're trying to target as your primary audience and your persona. Any questions so far or thoughts? You're on mute. No? Good? Okay.
I have a question, because I've kind of gone here with COVID. We quit charging for all our training because we needed to get training out, and we had COVID funding. And so we quit charging. And now that we no longer get that funding, no one wants to pay for our training. So are there lessons to be learned if you lead with cost driven, or at some point you're trying to liquidate your old inventory? What are, some of the nuances there?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it's really important to consider and reconsider cost or value driven and the percentages. Again, the two extremes are one thing, but what you see for something like that, what I see, Jamie, is a hybrid model where, hey, we've got to go back. And so people will have you sign up maybe at no cost or at a low cost, 10, 15, 20 bucks, but to get the recording after, you either have to give some information that allows you to be marketed to in different ways, and or some places have you, actually pay for a recording to have it, in perpetuity, as opposed to putting it on YouTube. That's a very common. Whether that works or not, I don't know. But I will say this: I think the notion of getting people to understand value and cost is a slippery slope when you go to free and a freemium model. But I think I would consider going back to, what does freemium look like for something like this? So maybe it should get 2 for free, and then you have to pay. That's a big part of subscriptions. And news stories, for example, is a big one. Hey, you can get 2 New York Times articles, and then you've got to pay. So giving a little bit back and meeting people part way and helping them understand, hey, I'm getting back to the business kind of side of this, and I'm giving you access, but I'm also going to need to sustain myself. And I will say this, one of the themes, I was on a seminar the other day that is big as you transition from value, cost, and cost to value, is transparency and tweaking the freemium model based on what your costs are, which we'll talk about, fixed, variable, and so forth. So I think that there are lessons to be learned from what the New York Times and digital media are doing. ESPN Plus is another good one. You get a little bit of access or a taste, and then you have to start paying a little bit. Now, the other difference, just as a side note that you guys might want to consider based on your business model is it worth going to a pay by use model, or is it better to go to more of the monthly recurring revenue? And that's hard to answer for people, but that's more of the apps that we have, $1.99, $5.99, or is it better to go pay $10 for this? And that's a big thing, because if you think about $5.99 doesn't feel like a lot per month, but that adds up to be $72 a year. And as I said before, people don't turn things off. So that's often recurring revenue for you in a way that's very sustainable, that's very important for your business. Or is it better to do 10 or 25 bucks and forego that because people don't want to sign up for recurring? The other thing that's very popular is buying in 3-month chunks. Noom, if you have the apps or fitness apps do a lot of that. I'm going to buy in 3-month chunks. I'm going to renew automatically, but I'm not going to make you pay for a year. I'm going to give you 3 months. So I think converting from cost to value, you should, personally, my take is address it monthly. Don't necessarily change from one to the other, but figure out on the sliding scale how much you can give away to convert someone to a longer paying customer.
And if I can throw out there, we have a lot of like continuing ed requirements in my field. And so like I've got Telehealth Certification Institute, like they'll offer some parts free, but if you want the video recording, you got to pay for that. Or if you can't make that live time, too bad, so sad, you need to go and actually pay $20 or $30 for that course. And so it's where it's like, it's not an overwhelming chunk. And then now they're offering a subscription level as well. Whereas a different training section that I've got is you pay $25, $30 up front, you can attend live, you get the recording, but you still have to log into their site to access the recording. So you're constantly getting exposed to their info anytime you need to go back and get it. So I've seen a lot of models.
And you know what I would think about, back to the customer persona, like, is my customer coming in for continuing ed, or is my customer making a one-time decision, or are they going to do the whole program? So those are 3 different people, right? Continuing ed is a little bit on a regular basis. One time says, oh, I need it, I'm willing to pay more for it because maybe I have a time crunch for recertifying. And then the other says, hey, I'm new to this and I've got to get it all. So that's where, again, this customer persona, and you might add another one, to your situation. But if you can identify that, like thinking about that, that's a great example of, those are 3 specific pain points. And if you need it and you need to get certified because you're going to lose it, you're willing to pay more for convenience. If you're just getting into it and you want 6 months, right, then you're going to pay moderate because you're going to want it, and you're not going to want to change your whole lifestyle. You're going to want to go through a process versus, hey, I need to just do this on a regular basis. But again, back to this persona, this is your friend. You don't want to have 20 of them, but modify and refine. But like, even just targeting those 3 things, think about the decisions you'd make around cost, investment, and value. So your value is high if you offer someone an ability to get certified in 48-hour window because they're going to lose something. High value, So that's where you can start refining, and that's where magic in business model starts to happen, where I can do that really easily. I mean, I think about the restaurants who pivoted from come in and sit down to, I'm going to take my staff and they're going to be drivers. Right. And they made more money, arguably, in the takeout industry than they did in the sit down. And now they're figuring out, how do I go back and do 50-50? And some of them are saying, I don't even want to. Some of them are saying it's more lucrative for me to do that. So I'm shutting down my dining room, or I'm reducing my dining room in favor of that. So that's another good example, maybe related to us or not, but where in COVID, they went one way, and now how do they come back, and do they? And you know what? It's okay to say, hey, my business model has changed. So that's the other thing, is I wouldn't be afraid to make shifts based on things, but just know that if you've got to revisit that enough and not think, okay, this is done, it's never going to change again, because it might. Oh, sorry, did I mute myself? Sorry about that. I'm a big fan of the persona because I use it a lot. And if I have things on there that I'm unclear about, I use it, and then it informs my cost structure. It informs, should I revisit these other parts on the canvas? But it becomes a central thing, even to me more centralized than my pure value proposition, because if my persona changes, I tweak other things. I rarely tweak my value proposition and then change my persona. But as I deal with customers and clients that are buying, then I make changes appropriately. So in understanding your cost, again, this is where I just stay. I'm nothing wrong with accounting folks or finance, but I think they know these terms like the back of their hand. And I am not an accountant, I'm not a finance person. I'm a biz dev person and strategy. I need to know and understand, but this is not my area of expertise in terms of what people would hire me to do, right? I would have an accounting partner as we determine these, but my accounting partner would be asking me questions like this. This is why this is important for you guys. What are your fixed costs? So it's really important that I understand my fixed costs are the ones that don't change with an increase or decrease in my demand of what I'm selling. That would be rent, property taxes, insurance. Like I pay business insurance. I'm sure a lot of you guys do. It's like 100 and whatever, $2 a month, no matter what. I don't have a storefront, but when I did, my storefront was $3,000 a month. Potentially some utilities, though those can vary. But this is, the things that you just have to pay in personal life. That could be a car payment, that could be your mortgage, even food is variable, although you probably have an idea of what you spend. But think about fixed costs. So your accounting people are going to say, what are your fixed costs? And they're going to give you examples, but they're not looking at you saying, tell me all of your costs and give me the accounting terminology. They're saying, what are you spending money on and how much is it, so that they can aggregate a budget. And conversely, there's variable cost. And that's a cost that changes in proportion. So a non-business example, when my kids come home from college, my food bill goes up. When my kids are gone, my food bill stays down. That could be for you, the cost of gas if you're traveling, right? Or if you are taking airline flights and stuff, you might have a travel budget, but it might be that you spend $500 this month and $1,000 next month. It could also be something that rises and falls as production does. So let's say you're in the Christmas tree business. You've got 3 months where you're selling Christmas trees and your production is up, up, up. And then the other months it's down. So if your production goes up and you need raw materials, you might be buying more things. You might be paying for more staffing. That's a variable cost. And when they go down, then that's, an example of a variable cost. But they can go up or down depending on what's going on around sales, around sourcing, around resources. And there's also this notion of semi-variable cost. Food is an example of something like that, where or even gas, you're going to spend an amount on that, but it may vary, a little bit more than what you'd like. And I call that semi-variable. Some people don't look at semi-variable, but I do. And here's why. I can almost always tell you what my baseline of a cost is going to be, but there's a variation to it. So I will use travel and food as an example. Yes, they're variable costs, but I generally know I'm going to spend $500 on food and travel a month in my business. And then there's variation above that or often below that if I'm not traveling. So I consider that semi-variable, where there's a component of it that's fixed, that I over time can tell you I'm going to spend, but depending on the time of year, it's going to go up or down. And that may be not just based on my sales, but it might be if I'm in convention season, right? If you guys are in businesses where you have conventions or things, then your costs are going to go up around that. And other times they're going to go down. So that's kind of how I look at that, where it's not a full variable. And the reason I like to do that is then I know I better give myself $500 of travel, even if I'm not going to use it all. And it helps me budget and plan and prepare. Any questions? I gave you sources on these so you can go and look at them more. And I would try to get away from being an accounting or finance expert. I think you all probably know in your head what your fixed, variable, and semi-variable costs are. And it's just a matter, this is what I would encourage you, get it on paper. get it on paper so it's specific, and then you can look at it at the end of the month, which I encourage you to do monthly and quarterly reviews to test and see where you're at, and then adjust it. That's the best way to do it. And you don't need an accountant to do it. You can do it without an accountant. You can do it based on what's in your head and what you know. And then as you get to a more sophisticated level of your business, you can get accounting and finance help. And you can do that as a generalist where you go out and hire, but they're going to ask you for what does my basic budget look like? And I think that's something we all can do. But I would encourage you to get it on paper. I have not ever seen a business be successful when they don't put their budget on paper. It's like putting goals on paper. You've got to do it. And if you don't, you might be able to get away with it, but often you're losing money where you don't realize it, and or potentially not saving where you could be saving. I've learned that the hard way.
And I just want to inject, if you think you're going to need funding, whether it's grants or loans or kind of both, you're going to have cash flow and
Yep.
financial reporting.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. I'll turn this up a little bit. Yeah, cash flow is a big deal as you start to go get money. And just as you have your business, when you need to invest more in your business, understanding what your cash flow is going to look like is going to help you do that. As a side note, but an important note, but it wouldn't be my starting point, but it's something to start thinking about. And when you're ready, digging into, which is consider all your costs. I mean, there's direct costs, there's indirect, fixed and variable. There's operating costs, which could be, your gas to get from A to B, your gas to go to a lunch date with someone. Those are kind of operating costs, if you will. Trying to use basic ones because they're not all complicated. Your operating costs could be your website, your utilities, your cost to operate your server. Opportunity costs are what does it cost you to do X versus Y? And so an example of this would be if I spend an hour with someone doing this and I'm missing something else, is the opportunity cost of missing presenting at a conference more or less than what I'm doing for this hour of the day, making calls to customers or manning the booth in my store. And opportunity costs are just, they to me are interesting because you have to make the best judgment of that. What is the opportunity cost and the risk of missing something or doing something in favor of another? And they're very subjective. They vary wildly and they're subjective, but I think that's a big deal. The easiest one that I give an example of is a 3-day trip to a conference worth it? That's the easiest one for people to think about, right? Which is the cost of the conference, the cost of travel, my personal time away from what I do. Is that opportunity cost going to be greater or less than something else? So an example of that is I spent 3 days in DC a couple of weeks ago working to get funding. And I basically had to shut down a lot of the things I do on a daily basis. It was worth it to me because the opportunity for us to get funding, was greater than what I needed to be doing. And so therefore that made that trip very easy for me to do. But sometimes these conferences or events, they're not going to be so clear. Or do I pay to sponsor something? Do I pay to sponsor a booth at my local son's football team? What is going to be that $500? Is it going to yield me $20,000 of revenue? Or is it going to maybe break even and get me a name in the community? And if I need 20,000, then maybe that's not the best use of my time because I may not get it. But if I'm trying to break even and support my community, that may be very worth it. So that's where you have to decide. An opportunity cost isn't all about money. It's about your time, the value, your role in the community, accessing more people. So it's not just a net revenue. It has to do with other factors. So that's a big one to really think about because there's 24 hours in a day. That's it. And there's a limited amount of money. So you've got to decide what is the best use of it. And sometimes, it's not always just a financial decision. It's about other things. Sunk costs, these are one of my faves. Sometimes things are gone and they worked out, and sometimes the money's gone and it didn't. And that's a sunk cost. You're never getting it back. Or a sunk cost, like poor Dave, I always pick on Dave, but Dave probably invested a ton in equipment. And that's a sunk cost. He's going to get depreciation on that and so forth when he does things. But if you invest in equipment for your business, that's considered also a sunk cost. You are going to get, some play out of that over the years, but it's gone, meaning you're not going to get that back at some point in time. I mean, there are more sophisticated definitions, but my brother, who's an accountant, and I had him do a training for some of my team. And when I bring accountants in and they plain speak it, that's what they say. They're like, when that money's gone, it's gone. You're not getting it back. And that makes it a lot clearer than saying, oh, when I invest in all this equipment or do this, but it's just when it's gone, it's gone. You're either going to put it on your tax return in some way or account for it with depreciation, but you're never getting that money back. And sometimes it works out and you need it to build your business. And other times you've done it and that exhibit didn't work out and you're not getting it back, but you know not to do it again or something like that. Controllable cost I put on there because we can control more costs than we think, and figuring out what that is. And it could be things add up. So I have in my tech stack, my things that I use a Google Drive, I have a website, I've got WordPress, I've got a couple of developers, I've got controllable cost, and me getting my arm around that about 6 months ago saved me almost $400 a month that I could control. And that's what I say, and accountants will tell you, don't get sloppy with your money, right? Be thoughtful about it and know where you're spending it. And if you're not using Canva and you're paying for a Canva license, then shut it down, so control the cost that you can, because a lot of them you can't. Like if I commit to a lease for 12 months, I can't control that cost. That is, I've committed, but I can control much more than I think. And the average, I had an accounting seminar recently. The average controllable cost, any guesses at what number of items people have in their business budget that they can control? I'd never heard this stat before, but it came out from an accountant. 12. There's generally 12 things you can reduce cost in your budget. That's pretty, I thought that was a lot, and generally anywhere from $400 to $2,000. Significant, right? 2,000 is not, that's more at the high end. This is for startups, by the way, not just everyone, but it really gets you thinking about what would I do with $500 more a month. So anyways, just food for thought to think about what are my controllable costs. And that's really understanding what's fixed, what's variable, and what's semi-variable. And what is the opportunity cost associated with each of those? Are these must-haves, nice-to-haves? And assessing your costs from that perspective. Any comments or questions? I hope this is helping to, demystify it a little bit. Like you can get super technical, but listen, when I'm ready to get technical, my personal advice, which I've heard from other startups, I go and get some help, whether it's an accounting friend that I'm not paying for. And I do try to network with accounting and legal people, by the way, because often the level of advice I need until I'm doing taxes is not overly sophisticated. Or I get somebody at a break, and for a couple $100, I can get my arms around a budget 4 times a year, right? As opposed to having somebody on staff. So think about creatively how to grow your network so that you're not overspending, but you can get help and advice when you need it. And then you spend on the things you need to when you need to get it right. And you can go, part of the reasons I dropped all these words in here for you is you can go Google these. Investopedia is a great source to get a lot of information and definition of them. But I'm trying to, plain speak it, because I think you have a lot more of this that if you can just get it out and think about it. So the key takeaway, listen, understand your monthly expenses, because then you can identify your metrics, and your metrics are what's going to guide you. It's going to be your North Star, your guiding light for success. Another big piece, and I'll just kind of talk about this here. This gets into some of the business side of it is, your net revenue, which is your gross revenue minus all your expenses. That's really what you're focused on. In startup land, I don't find you generally start at a high net revenue, right? Or even a high percentage of what's called a margin, of your 100% money that you make. What a margin is, what percentage of that is your net? And I think it starts off often like 20, 30, 35, 40, and over time should grow. But that's something to keep in mind as a metric, is like, what am I shooting for? What is my net revenue? What do I want to take home? What do I need to pay people? And what does that look like monthly and annually? A lot of times, one of the biggest mistakes, and to me, it is a mistake that people make, is they shoot for annual. And I tell people, you got to shoot for monthly. Now, in seasonal kind of scenarios, you might shoot for quarterly, but it's important to understand either a monthly or quarterly expectation to get you to annual. Otherwise, annual becomes a very big pile of money and very hard to break down the metrics that get you there. That is the number one takeaway that I would give people is that, and I say that if you can go monthly, that's what you need to do. And if you need to go, even semi-annual or quarterly is better than just an annual because it's just too long and you'll make too many mistakes along the way. We all do. That's part of it. And the big businesses did too. The only difference is they had people monitoring things, data analysts monitoring. I don't have that luxury. So I have to take into account, what does this look like? And it's not so much that I'm perfect. It's that I understand my net revenue I'm shooting for and where my expenses are. Because from there, I can look at what is my growth trajectory? Am I trending up or down or flat? Because I'll tell you, if you were in COVID and you're flat, you were probably pretty happy, right? Like that was a win. So growth trajectory doesn't have to be month over month. That can also be quarterly and annually. But understanding what happens on a monthly or a cycle basis allows you to understand the growth trajectory. Is it going the right way? And then where are your customers coming from? What's getting you to that growth or what's getting you to stay flat? For example, I met with a local restaurant, Castle Rock, and they're pretty flat right now. And they're pretty happy about that because they made it through COVID. And now they're saying, now I want more. So I said, well, where are your customers coming from to stay flat? And they didn't know. And I said, well, that's the first thing you need to figure out is what's keeping you there. Because then they know how much to proportion to that to stay flat. And then their growth may come from that group or it may come from someone else, right? So these, I put these in a particular sequence. This I learned a lot of this the hard way, but I put that there because often when I said, where are customers coming from? It wasn't as urgent, right? But when I say it in this sequence is like, what revenue are you shooting for? What does your growth look or not look like? And then I say, where your customers coming from? Now you can see a pattern, right? This is where my revenue is coming from, these people in this segment. So now back to, are they coming because my cost is effective or are they coming because they value my dining experience? All these things are interconnected, but now you understand where they're coming from. So you can double down on getting more of them. I want more of those types of customers. Or you can say, I'm going to open a new persona. I'm going to go after the 40 to 60-year-old people who are now working from home and want to get out to Starbucks once in a while. I don't know, making that up. You know what I mean? But you can add a persona and say, I've got this really well. I'm going to keep doing this here. And I'm going to add someone. Or wow, I've got 5% of the Castle Rock market. I'm going to go after 15 in this segment. What does that look like? And again, that just plays into where do you invest your time, your money, and so forth. Before you decide, do I stay in my area or do I go to a new persona though? I would look at what's called your average revenue per customer. How much does Dave spend in my restaurant? How much does he spend on my website? How long is he there? Does he refer people? Meaning, is he a really good customer for me? Because if the average revenue per customer is $3 and you think it should be more like 10, then maybe they're not your right customer. Then maybe you need another persona. And that's where you should invest more money, right? If your average customer is paying $25 and you're like, wow, that's amazing. I need 100 more people paying that. Great. Right. So that's where you start to go. My customers are coming from here. My average revenue per person is this. That's good, or that's not good enough. And here's what I need to do. So again, doesn't mean you're changing all your value proposition. Now you're just making priorities for where you invest time, money, and resources. The last one is kind of a hard one, I think, for people to get their arms around. What's your customer acquisition cost? I threw it in there. You may not start there, but over your first 6 months to 2-3 years in business, you want to really know what that is. And your customer acquisition cost is everything from how much money you've invested in marketing, in people resources, which would be like their hourly or their salary, in whatever the tech build is, and how much does it cost you to go out and get a customer. So just to use very round numbers, let's say it cost me $10 of marketing stuff, advertising, marketing. Say it cost me $10 for my website, that's $20, and say it cost me $20 for my time. So say it cost me $40 to put together an ad that goes out to Facebook that yields one customer who buys something from me. legitimately, basically for that $40, I acquired one customer, then my customer acquisition cost is $40. If I acquire 2 customers with that same effort, it's $20. 4 customers with that same effort, it's $10. You can get super sophisticated in this. And as we grow, you will get more sophisticated, but at face value, don't overthink it. Where are you putting your money in? Add it up. How many customers did you get from it? And how much did those customers spend? So it's literally adding 3 or 4 things together, and probably for startups, no more than 5 or 6 things. Out of the $100 I spent today, I acquired 2 customers. That means it cost me $50 per customer. Now you think about, did that customer spend $50 or did they spend more? And you start to realize, is that area that I'm advertising in worth it? So let's use Dave. Dave, I'm glad you're here because you're a good example. So for us, so last night I went to a football scenario. My son, we had a video production team. They did amazing work. They were paid for their work. So I think it cost upwards of 50 grand for their video work. And so they got paid for their work. In addition, they spent, I'm going to say, because I talked to the guy last night, close to 1,000 hours of time. So they were pretty much at a break even for the actual video production. The time it took for people to record their equipment, their production time after, like it literally broke even, which is astonishing. Maybe not for you, Dave, but for me, I was like, wow, they probably made a ton of money, but really they broke even because it was a whole season. It was equipment, people, and this over a whole season. So they said, listen, we broke even, but that's not why we do it. We did it because I just got exposed to 200 people in the community. And out of those 200 people, they ended up having almost 10 of them. I forget how much he said, but it was well over $200,000 of revenue through the rest of the year. So his point to me was, like my customer acquisition cost, he looked at that 50,000, which I considered revenue. He said, actually, that's my customer acquisition cost. I put that in. He sort of broke even in order to get another 200,000 of business. So my point to you in that is he knew how much money and time he spent to get there. He didn't overthink it. He said, am I going to invest the time and money to do it? And if so, how much is it going to cost me? And in plain speak, he basically broke even and spent very little to get those customers. His risk, his opportunity cost was, if I don't get any more customers, I'm going to break even and that's it. If I get customers, great. So you have to start thinking about things like, where is your time and money spent? And how much is it costing you to get these people? And is it worth it? Because even if it feels like a big dollar amount, you go to a conference and you exhibit for $2,500, but that yields you $100,000 of customers, then that's super worth it, right? Or if it yields you 10,000, it might be super worth it. It doesn't have to be it's really the proportion of 3 to 1, 4 to 1, 5 to 1. And what you're looking is for the areas that get you more of, for every dollar I spend, I get 5 customers, 10x customers. It's an X factor, 5x, 10x, 20x. Over time, you should try to get closer to 100x. But as we start out, we don't start there. So I started with 2x. I said, if for every dollar, do I get 2 customers? For every 10, can I get 2 customers? Then I said, can I get 5 customers, right? So this is a game of inches, not a big number, but understanding that for every dollar, how many customers are you getting is a big deal. That's a lot of information, but I'm trying to break it down. Any thoughts or questions on that? You probably are not going to know this off the top of your head. You shouldn't. This guy last night, he'd been in business for a while, but it's complicated if you try to do it in your head. Put it on paper, have a whiteboard. There's no magic. There are formulas, but there's no magic wand to get the formula right. But the more you can get things on paper, the more you can play with the numbers that matter to you. And when you start to identify, this is as lean as I can get, this is what it costs me, this is what I'm doing, this stuff that we're talking about right now, this becomes very easy to figure out. But the hardest part is starting with your cost, looking at your revenue. And then you start to, all this is analyzing and hypothesizing about, where is my money coming from? Where are my customers coming from? How much do they pay? But it starts with getting the basic cost structure down. Make sense? Again, a lot of time after we can spend on that. But now let's convert to, how does this help your key metrics? Well, metrics are anything that allow you to evaluate the health of your business. Success is what is the word, but I would say the health of your business, because sometimes you're not ultimately successful, but you're healthy. You're trending well. It's like the fitness game or the nutrition. You don't get there overnight. You have to trend positively. And so examples of metrics could be the daily visitors to your website, number of companies who open emails. You know, so I send a lot of email campaigns. So one of my metrics is that I want to get 25% of my emails open. That's a high number. So it depends. I send 100 out, 300 out a month, 100 out every couple of weeks. I want 25% of them open because I know that if I get 25% open, I can close X number of those. So the metric is a really isolated thing that you're looking at to drive behavior and things that you do. And if you don't pay attention to metrics, then you never really know how well campaigns are working or the things that you're doing are working. And they may vary. I mean, it could be, it's not, I guess my point to you guys, it's not just sales, but it could vary widely. It could be number of referrals, number of people who post a review, number of positive reviews, right? It could be a lot of things that you're saying, hey, if I can get them in and they give a positive review, they refer me to 2 more customers. These are the 5 most common metrics for startups. I mentioned customer acquisition costs just before, even though I think that's a process to get to because it's one of the number 1 things that startups are measured by. Not everybody, but startups, because if you can't get customers, you can't keep going, right? You got to get customers. So customer retention is another one. Viral reach, which is about reaching people through online marketing and referrals and reviews. Turnover is another one. Turnover means customers go, I've got to go get another one. And then ultimately revenue. But I put these on here. Now I'm only going to talk about one today, but I put them on there because everyone goes right to revenue. And I'm like, there are other metrics, and knowing where you sit on each of these is important. But customer acquisition cost is probably the big one. So I tried to dig in a little bit on that. And this is a process. You're not going to figure this out today in 5 minutes, but it's something to think through and it's worth the time to spend after today. To remain viable, you've got to have a solid business model, and that comes from understanding where your customers come from and how much it costs to get them. So I tell people that this can kill you at any stage. If we fail on this, we fail in general as a business because we have to know how to measure that so that we can make good decisions and shift and pivot as necessary. You can eventually use a customer model, but if you don't have customers yet, you can use mathematical models to estimate. That is good enough. And I always tell people, when I train people, they say, I can't do this yet. I don't have customers. And I'm like, you have to estimate. You have to guess how much you're going to spend. I don't care if it's a guess, refine later, but there's models, but they're based on your guessing of your fixed cost, your variable cost. So estimate, it's going to cost me $100 to do a Facebook campaign and a Google campaign, $100 to do my website, plus my own time. It's going to cost me $1,000. Okay. And you start there. All that is a starting point until you get actual data of customers. And it could be 10 customers. And then you can calculate it with, okay, I thought I was going to spend $1,000 and I thought I'd get this many. This is what my break even is. But now I realize I spent $800 and I got 50 customers. Great. So until you get actual data, start with a hypothesis. That is my number 1 thing. When people say I can't do it, I'm like, you have to. Otherwise, you're budgeting on vaporware and you're building stuff on vaporware. You got to have some idea, a ballpark that it's going to cost you X. And you might be wildly wrong, but remember the canvas is full of sticky notes. No problem. Change it. Hey, I learned this. It cost me more or less. And this is how many customers. So that is one of my big takeaways for people. And these are the kind of things that you estimate for costs. These things right here. You don't have to estimate more than this to get it right. What is my guess for a number of new customers per month I'm shooting for? How much does it cost me to develop the service, right? I have a friend of mine who's on Etsy and he does great wood carvings. Well, he knows that it costs him about $100 for carving. So he's got the machinery already. He's got some depreciation, but he knows basically it costs him $100. And then he'll say, once they come, they're not coming back, but I need to get them referred. So his estimated life of that is he's not looking for people to keep coming back for certain things. He's looking for referrals. You may say, I want people to keep coming back, but what does my lifespan look like? And then from there, what's my estimated marketing cost? Am I marketing on Google, Facebook, Instagram, on Etsy? Am I advertising on certain websites? Am I promoting locally to my football team? I'm making this up, but just estimate, you know what I mean? Those are mine, I guess. But don't worry about being right as much as being specific. And then go back when you get real data and say, okay, this is how much it actually cost. And this is how many customers I actually got. And then start to decide what was worth it more. And that's all. I mean, this is why you guys are business owners. You know, hey, that was worth it. That's easy. That's hard. That's complicated. That's not. That's the best $10 I've spent and got. You know, I give gift cards to people a lot as a referral. And I find that if they refer someone, I get more referrals if I give them a $10 gift card to Starbucks. I mean, that seems to work for me. Great. Instead of giving away the farm, $10, I can manage that. You know what I mean? So whatever it may be, just estimate while you get started. But these are the most common ones. And this article down here, the Shane Barker, one of the best articles, I give it to everybody. He's got a lot of good material, but he's got one of the best ones describing each of these 5, which we don't have time to do, but really good to look at. And he plain speaks it. So you don't have to be a financial whiz. You just have to be thoughtful about what you know you want to do and pick the most important ones. Any questions? You guys are so good. It's a lot to digest, but I encourage you to digest it. And I'm going to give you just a couple more slides and then we'll close up. Key metrics are only one part of your key performance indicators. This is something I had to learn. They drive triggers that are the behavior to get people to do something, which is generally your strategic objective. So here's what I mean by that. If I'm a local law firm and I might want to know how many visitors sign up for a newsletter, and then from there, how many of them request something, a service? Well, my objective is to increase leads, right? My key metric though is about customer acquisition. I need signups for a newsletter. I need requests for retaining offers. My trigger is what needs to happen for them to do something to sign up for the website, right? So now I'm creating a way to market to people. And so I might look at it and say, oh, those who see, you know, the pop-ups that come up, hey, thank you for signing up or consider signing up for my newsletter. That may be a good trigger. People like that. They don't X out of it. They actually sign up. That's very common these days. And then what's the trigger for those submitting an actual request to talk to me more, buying a car, wanting to hear more from a local law firm? KPIs incorporate all of these things. So they're indicators. And the reason they're indicators is they tell you, hey, if I want to increase lead gen and I want to get more customers to sign up for the newsletter, these triggers need to happen. I need to have this many people click submit or this many people put their email address in. And now my indicators, even if I don't have revenue, remember I said it's not just about pure success, it's about the trend of your business. Are you trending healthy? I should have an indication that I'm trending healthy because I've got 120 new people doing this. And that's when you start over time to get to your conversion rate. But this is a great little slide. You can keep it on the website I just gave you. There's a lot of examples. This is a good one, but think about this for your own business. What's my objective? What's the metric? What's the trigger? And now I understand if I do this well, this is going to be my indicator, because the more of these I get, the better off I'm going to be. Make sense? I love these because they're in plain speak. So that's the end of my piece here. And then we'll go to Jamie's, but any questions before I transition on this as examples? The more specific you can get, the better. When these are conceptual, they're hard, awful, and almost overwhelming, in my opinion. When you get specific on one or two, then more will come. The hardest part is getting your first 1, 2, or 3 of these. And I'm telling you, once you have a couple, then they're going to come like wildfire, because then you start to see all the things that contribute to your success. Awesome. All right, Jamie, you ready?
I'm ready. I do want to echo what Jody said, that the beauty of the Lean Canvas is by going through this process. And we've talked for 4 hours now about going through that process, but it becomes quicker and quicker And by having your metrics, you can build, measure, and either pivot or double down on it. So it just becomes so automatic, not just for a startup, but really for your business ongoing success, which is why we call this the LEANUP scale up process. It really is an incredible model to have you evolve your business. And Jody, I can't thank you enough for explaining it so thoroughly so that we can understand why that matters. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And on this slide, I just want to emphasize that you need a lean canvas or a business model canvas to create your business and run your business. And when you do need to access capital, you're going to need either with an existing business, 3 years of your financials. With a new business, you're going to need your personal financials. And then even on grants, you're always going to have some sort of collateral. So whether it's a GoFundMe, because you really have nothing to start with, to your family and friends contributing, or to a grant that then has matching funds and you can contribute the matching funds. So I want to emphasize that because we have so many incredible ideas coming our way, but without these other steps, there's no way to make them a reality. Next slide. And I'm really excited that we've gone through this series of 4, and Jody's actually going to do the how and why, the first lean canvas again on December 13th. And then we'll have those rolling out on demand. And I hope to have Jody back too for some in-person if we get past this COVID situation, or again live like this, because I think it's very beneficial to be able to ask questions. We also have our marketing series every 2 weeks to talk about how you can get more customers or address your customer persona in a unique way. We have a startup series that happens every month. And then I'm really excited, my old colleague from way back in my career, Pamela Starr, now is a Google presenter, and she's just an incredible person in how she explains all the different aspects of Google. And she'll be talking about YouTube, so I'm very excited about that. And then lastly, Nathan Lawrence, who is a local lawyer in Salida, but came from Denver and worked with Techstars and a lot of other startups. So he's an entrepreneur himself, but also a lawyer, is going to teach us what all the steps we need to do legally to start your business. So I'm excited that that's coming up. And I'd like to thank you for joining us. I think there's one more slide, but it's just the end. Please do reach out to us, Jody or myself. This is the time really one-on-one consulting will be very helpful for you to finish this canvas. And we can either help you ourselves or connect you with other experts. So thank you. And Jody, if you have any closing comments.
Agreed. It's been a real pleasure. And I'm really happy. Dave and I are connecting this week, but if any of you all want to connect, I'm happy to. Sometimes it's just talking through them. And I would just encourage you not to be intimidated. It takes practice, and the only way to practice is to do it. So happy to have those conversations, and think, Jamie, what you're doing is terrific. So thank you also for all of your help and guidance.
Thank you. Well, we appreciate all of you and hope to see you again soon.